Fort Wayne, Indiana, in the spring of 1988, felt like many other Midwestern cities. It was a place where neighbors knew each other, and children were expected to play outside until the streetlights came on. 8-year-old April Tinsley was a happy child, and on Good Friday, she was doing exactly that. She left her home to play with friends down the street, making the most of a sunny afternoon. But as evening fell, the tone shifted. April didn't return home. The neighborhood search began immediately, but as the hours passed, the community's concern turned to a desperate local panic. Law enforcement and hundreds of volunteers launched a massive search effort. The city remained on high alert for days, but the hope of finding her safe ended when her body was eventually discovered. The murder of April Tinsley left a lasting mark on Fort Wayne. The collective sense of safety the town once enjoyed was gone, replaced by a trauma that would stay with the community for decades. The person responsible for the crime didn't just vanish. Over the next 30 years, they chose to actively torment the community, refusing to let the town move on. The taunts were brazen and highly personal. Disturbing handwritten notes began appearing in places where they were guaranteed to be found by families, tucked into mailboxes and left on the seats of children's bicycles. In these notes, the writer used an eerie, looping hand to boast about the crime. He claimed responsibility and explicitly threatened that he would eventually strike again. These recurring messages kept the city in a state of high alert. For 30 years, the notes served as a terrifying reminder that a predator was still out there, seemingly always one step ahead of the police. Detectives were stuck. The limits of traditional physical evidence, like handwriting and eyewitness accounts, failed to identify a man who felt so untouchable that he openly mocked the authorities for 3 decades. By the 2010s, the investigation had hit a wall. Using conventional methods, detectives were no closer to an arrest than they had been in 1988. That changed in 2018 with a shift toward genetic genealogy. This new method didn't rely on witness statements or paper trails, but on the biology the killer left behind. The killer had spent decades leaving intentional clues to frustrate the police, but the microscopic trail he left at the crime scene, evidence he couldn't control, was about to be his undoing. Standard law enforcement DNA databases only work if the suspect has been arrested before and entered into the system. Since the killer had no prior record, his DNA sat in the files for 30 years with no match. To find him, investigators changed tactics. Instead of searching for the killer's profile directly, they began searching for his relatives. The process begins by uploading the crime scene DNA profile into commercial and open-source genealogical databases, the same ones used by millions of people to find their ancestors. The software identifies shared genetic markers to find the suspect's distant cousins. Genealogists trace these family trees backward, finding where the lines converge at common great-grandparents. From there, they map descendants forward, eliminating mismatches until the sprawling tree narrows to a small pool of individuals. This process takes an anonymous suspect and turns them into a specific person. It uses the mathematics of biology to reveal an identity that had been hidden for 30 years. In 2018, investigators applied this mapping process to the evidence from the April Tinsley case. The research led detectives to a specific name, John Miller, an unremarkable man living in a small town just outside of Fort Wayne. After 3 decades of searching, the investigation came to a head on a quiet street. Police arrived at Miller's door to finally confront the person they believed was behind the notes. When Miller opened the door, he didn't seem surprised. His first words to the officers were, "I've been waiting." He confessed to the murder and admitted he was the one writing the taunting notes. The man who thought he had outsmarted the law for 30 years was caught, not by a slip-up in his letters, but by a science that he could not see or manipulate. The arrest brought a long-awaited sense of closure to April's family. For Fort Wayne, it meant that a dark chapter in the city's history could finally be closed. But the significance of the Tinsley case goes beyond Indiana. Miller's capture served as a clear signal for the future of cold cases nationwide. It shows that the passage of time is no longer a shield for those who commit violent crimes. Physical distance and the lack of a prior criminal record are no longer enough to remain hidden. Genetic genealogy has provided a way to find the truth when all other leads have vanished. It proves that even when a killer hides in the shadows for decades, The answers can still be found in the code we all carry.